The American oil company North Corporation is building an ice road to explore the remote Arctic National Wildlife Refuge in search of oil. Ed Pollock, the operations base leader, is back after going to town to make a deal with the government so that 2 environmentalists can report on the mission. We soon meet the rest of the team: Lee, the team's patrolman, Robert the mechanic, Abby, the mission supervisor, and Maria the cook. Ed asks about the young Maxwell, and Abby replies that the young man is patrolling the plains and will be back soon. Ed discovers that the environmentalists have already been sent and are soon introduced. Abby introduces Elliot Taylor, and Ed asks if the boss wasn't some James Hoffman. Elliot replies that he is his boss, and soon James appears on site and greets Ed. Ed seems to dislike the presence of the environmentalists on site. During dinner, Ed provokes the team, trying to turn them against the 2 men. He accuses James of the work stoppage and demands explanations. Elliot explains that the Arctic is not cold enough, but Ed retorts that they are in Alaska, where it is always cold. James responds by saying that this was exactly the problem, that the temperature had risen across the region and it was still not safe to continue work. The unexpected rise indicates something is wrong and that work cannot proceed. Amid provocations and tension, Ed suggested everyone play football to try to lighten the mood forcibly. He takes the chance to ask young Maxwell to accidentally hurt James. James ends up getting hit in the nose, causing him to bleed and ending the football game. Later, while everyone is busy or relaxing in their rooms, Maxwell decides to do a night watch when he notices a strange herd running aimlessly in the snow. During the day, we find out that Abby is having an affair with James. She informs him that she will have a meeting and asks him to go talk to Ed, but James is not too keen after Ed was rude during dinner. At that moment, Ed knocks on Abby's door and calls for her. She responds that she will see him soon. Maxwell prepares for the daily round and asks James if he has been to the KIK well. James replies yes, but only to the box. Maxwell comments that he often passes by and asks what is under it. James says it is a pipe with a valve, but Maxwell insists on knowing what is beyond the valve. James does not know exactly and suggests watching North's video, which explains everything. Ed ends up discovering the romance between the 2 and asks Robert how long they have been together. Robert, with no choices, states they have been together for 3 weeks, and Ed says it won't last. Robert shows a magazine discussing James's work, where he criticizes oil exploration, of which Ed is totally in favor. Ed states he should not be there, as it is just wasting money, and Robert tries to defend him. The man claims James thinks the Arctic is not well and says he believes the permafrost is melting. Ed thinks all this is nonsense. James, on the other hand, is heading to his research cabin and discovers someone has been rummaging through the place. He makes his report on how much the temperature has risen, but also reports a consistent warming of the underground. At that moment, a known raven appears, and James jokes and asks if it was perhaps him who messed with the paperwork. He feeds the animal and states that something is wrong, perceiving this both from the numbers and from intuition. Maxwell manages to reach the KIK box. He approaches it, and at that moment, James is struggling with a strong wind, and upon exiting, he discovers some strange footprints making a circle around his cabin. Meanwhile, the rest of the group is in a meeting. Ed announces they will change the plan and bring in the equipment with Rolligans. Abby asks if this was approved, and Ed reveals that the company is behind it and that everything is already ready, needing only James's signature. While he questions where James is, Robert enters the room and reveals his concern about Maxwell, who still hasn't returned. He explains that the Skidoo had a problem and fears it broke down, leaving Maxwell trapped in the snow. James is running back to the base and finds Abby, who reveals that Maxwell still hasn't returned. Ed interrupts the conversation and says not to worry about the young man, as he knows very well how to take care of himself. James then asks if they haven't felt any wind, but Abby replies that nothing strange has happened. Ed takes the opportunity to poke at James and comments on the meeting that James didn't attend. Abby decides to search for the young man along with Lee, and soon the 2 set out on the Skidoo. James apologizes to Ed for not attending the meeting, but Ed does not accept it and asks him to talk. He presents his proposal to bring back the equipment and asks James to sign the document. James says he will think about it, leaving Ed furious, who tries to force him to sign. James remains unfazed and firmly replies that he will not do anything just because Ed wants him to, adding that Maxwell's safety is more important right now. When James leaves, Ed picks up the phone and calls a man named Foster, informing him of James's refusal and revealing that they will continue without authorization. The group waits for news about Maxwell, and Ed tries to contact Abby, but only receives static. At that moment, the phone rings, and Ed answers, discovering the call is for James. He hands the phone to James and realizes that on the other end is Foster. James replies that if Ed continues with those plans, he will be leaving on Tuesday, and hangs up the phone. Lee and Abby return, revealing that the boy abandoned the Ski-Doo and that they could not find him because of the blizzard. Abby suggests calling a plane to look for him from the air, but Ed disagrees and informs them that they will all search for him. Just as they are about to leave, Maxwell suddenly appears at the door. The young man acts strangely and reveals that he tried to make contact, but the radio only produced static. Robert checks the device and discovers that Maxwell traveled about 400 kilometers, but the young man does not remember that. They take him to feed him, and Ed asks him not to turn off the radio, but Maxwell reveals again that it was not working. Looking at the food, the young man seems unwell and asks to rest. During the conversation, Robert comments that Maxwell seems quite scared, but Ed assures him that he is just tired and will be fine. Later, James talks to Elliot, saying he is going to resign and asks his friend to take his place, as well as to write a report on Ed. Later, James and Abby have an intimate moment, and Abby notices that he is acting strangely. He reveals that he is being removed from the project, which leaves Abby a bit shaken, and she asks why he did not go to the meeting. He reveals that he will ask to cancel the project, as he believes they can no longer bring the equipment. Abby states that it is too late for that. The next day, the group sets out to explore, and again Ed argues with James about how they will bring in the equipment, but James does not want to talk about this ridiculous plan, saying it will not work, as the Ski-Doo will not hold up. Elliot is in James's cabin and rummages through his research, finding the notebook with his notes. In James's information, he describes a wind felt earlier that was not common, but carried fury with it. He reveals that something is about to be thawed from the permafrost and expresses not understanding how they can disregard a world that gave them life. James questions when the Earth will react to fight them, just as any organism defends itself against a virus. He also wonders about the thing they saw, and if it decides to rise to confront them, what form it would take. James adds that this will be the last hell, total collapse, and hope will die there. Elliot is terrified by the reports, decides to leave the cabin and notices that the sky looks strange. When he sees something moving quickly on the ground, Elliot is on alert, still scared by James's notes. He looks down and sees blood, touches his own nose, and realizes the blood is his. Suddenly, a strong storm begins, and the man decides to run away from the place. At the base, Maria is exercising when she decides to check if Maxwell is okay, so she heads to the young man's room. But she does not find him there, and when she is returning, she finds him beside her acting strangely. He reveals that something wrong is happening. Robert appears filming and asks the others why it is raining in the Arctic in February. Maria only comments that her friend is acting strange, especially when they talk about the weather. Elliot manages to return to the base, but his nose won't stop bleeding, and his heart is nearly jumping out. The man decides to take a little whiskey to try to calm down. During dinner, everyone asks James what is happening with the weather, and he reveals that things are changing. Ed asks his team not to listen to him, as that is normal. Lee appears and reveals that Maxwell still does not want to eat, and is just staring at the window without saying anything. They all agree to send him home, but Ed disagrees and says he is not going anywhere. Ed notices Elliot's bleeding nose, finds it disgusting, and asks the man to clean himself up, which seems to irritate Elliot. James decides to take food to Maxwell's room, ignoring Ed's orders. James asks the young man what he saw that scared him so much, and Maxwell reveals that the KIK box is haunted. James asks the young man to calm down and breathe, but he continues to speak, revealing that they should not be there and claiming that they are just grave robbers. And now the ghosts are coming out of the ground and questions James about what oil is, as well as the fossils of plants and animals from millions of years ago. James considers the possibility of the boy going home, but he says his parents would kill him. James says no one will kill him and asks him to explain his situation to his parents and his Uncle Ed, as they will understand. James again tries to offer food to the young man, but at that moment he gets upset and throws it away, asking if the man does not understand that there is something out there that wants to drive them away. He starts to freak out and goes after James. At that moment, Ed appears and pushes the young man away from the man. Maxwell, frustrated, insists that James tell about the terrifying thing he knows, but the man simply leaves the place without explanation. Abby talks to Ed, and the man questions what happened in that room and blames James for it. He also reveals that he already knows about the two and says he is disappointed in her, asserting that she is breaking the rules. Abby reveals that they are not breaking any rules, as James works for North, and she for another company, and says that he is just jotting down their report. She also tells him that he made a mistake in asking to have him removed, and Ed lashes out, saying he will not let him ruin things there. Abby returns to the room, and James says that Maxwell saw something outside. She asks him not to get involved with the young man, as they are already taking care of him. Abby says he should have signed the contract, but he says that Ed knows nothing, and that they need to refuse to bring more prepared people to find out what is happening. Abby tells him not to say anything to anyone, as the North Agreement explicitly states this. He tries to convince her to be on his side, but Abby refuses and asks him to take his case to North. While everyone sleeps, Maxwell is completely naked and decides to sneak out to record something outside. The next day, Ed pressures Robert to fix things faster, and Robert reveals that he is doing so, but they are breaking down faster than he can fix. Soon, everyone discovers that the boy is not in the room and that his things are strewn on the floor. They soon start to follow the footprints left by Maxwell and decide to use the skidoo since the footprints are headed toward the KYK box. Upon arriving there, they discover Maxwell's corpse, completely frozen and with his two eyes missing, which were eaten by ravens. The duo quickly returns to the base, bringing bad news to the rest of the group. Ed asks where they found him, and Lee replies it was at the KIK box. Outraged, he states that Maxwell should never have been there and that Ed should have sent him back home. Elliot wants to inform the news, but Robert informs that all the radios are silent. Ed tries to regain control of the situation and says they will wait until dawn. He warns that Foster is on the way with someone else and informs that he will ask pilot Gary to remove the young man's body. They manage to recover the camera and see the recording left by Maxwell, who states that he saw something outside. He tries to record on the camera and says he hears noises, but so far, nothing appears. Suddenly, Maxwell turns to the lens and asks if they are seeing when he is brutally attacked by an unknown creature. The group is terrified and cannot believe what they saw, except for James, who had already reported strange things earlier. Ed states that enough of that madness and grabs the tape, deciding to burn it. This deeply irritates Elliot, as it was evidence. Ed loses control, lunges at Elliot, and states that he is the one in charge there and that everything is under control. Lee pulls him away, and Ed questions whether they want the boy's parents to see him wandering around without clothes. Elliot retorts, saying this could open an investigation. Enraged, Ed insists that there will be no investigation, as the boy went out on an expedition and died from natural causes. Elliot questions whether Ed will really ignore the fact that the young man was attacked by something unknown. Irritated, Ed states that he and James will leave on the first plane tomorrow and asks everyone to stay away from him. Ed, confused, blames James for that situation. At that moment, Elliot's nose begins to bleed, and Abby asks him to come back inside. Maria tends to Elliot and asks Lee if this is the return of Chanu, but Lee does not know what she is talking about. Maria explains that it is an evil spirit, better known as Wendigo, and asks Lee what he thinks about it. He responds that he believes in what his eyes see. James is covering Maxwell's body when he hears noises, discovering that it is Robert, who is working late. James realizes that the man's hands are injured from working so hard and asks him to rest. Robert replies that he is fine, but James suggests that he cut back on the alcohol, as he is not thinking clearly. Robert responds that after this winter, he will head south, as he is already tired of that hell. James enters Ed's office and says he needs to urgently talk to him. Ed responds that he is responsible for the young man, but now he is dead. James laments the situation, but states he can make a difference and get everyone out of there that night because it is not safe. The man explains that there is an abnormal atmosphere affecting everyone and emphasizes that first it was Maxwell speaking nonsense, and now it is Robert who is out there. Ed asks him not to start with that again, but this time he is willing to listen. James explains that it is some sort of acid gas escaping from the ground. Ed retorts, stating that H2S is 800 meters below the surface and would not just come up out of nowhere just because James believes in it. James continues, mentioning that the melting permafrost could be releasing this. Ed thinks all of it is nonsense and asks him not to fill his team's heads with this crap. James leaves the place, stating he will report it. Trying to convince Abby, James states that something is happening that she does not understand yet. Abby responds that she works with evidence, not with theories, and James asks if Maxwell's body is not enough. Abby asserts it is merely the boy's irresponsibility. James looks at her disdainfully and states that she and Ed are perfect for each other. After that, he talks to Elliot, who tries to send some emails unsuccessfully. James asks his friend to pack as quickly as possible, as staying there is too dangerous, but realizes that Elliot is also acting strangely. Tired, James sits down and reflects on everything he has seen so far. In a brief moment, Maxwell appears in the dark and asks if he saw. Startled, James turns on the lights, but finds nothing. As he walks down the corridor, he recalls Maxwell's words and starts to feel nauseous. Upon entering Elliot's room, he discovers the bed covered in blood, and upon touching his friend's wrist, realizes he is dead. He quickly runs to warn everyone, and they cover their friend's body, mourning the loss. Ed informs the group that he and Abby have decided to temporarily shut down operations so everyone can undergo examinations. He asks everyone to pack their bags and requests that Lee inform Robert about this. Outside, Lee finds neither Robert nor Maxwell's body. Meanwhile, Gary arrives by plane with Foster and another man. However, the plane begins to malfunction and ends up crashing into the base, exploding, nearly killing Robert, who is thrown away. The man panics and starts running as his legs are on fire. Lee runs after him and tries to put out the fire, but ends up getting burned as well. The others try to put out the fire on the man and the rest of the plane. Ed tries to wake Foster, but the man is too injured, and he gives up to do something else. At that moment, the rest of the plane explodes, further increasing the flames inside the base. Lee enters to try to put out the fire, while the team carries the injured inside. Everyone screams in pain as the burns are severe, and Abby decides to apply morphine to them. Unconscious, Robert pleads with James to get everyone out of there. Now they are completely trapped, as even the vehicles caught fire and the plane is completely destroyed. Ed tells everyone to hold on until tomorrow, as they will miss them and send another plane to get them. James says that this will not work and reveals that there is still a working skidoo and that he can go to Fort Crow. Ed asks what he is talking about, and James explains that it is a village about 30 kilometers away. Ed does not want him to leave, but Abby says that the situation is out of control and they need to act. Ed reveals he has a better plan and states that the camp on the ice road is 40 kilometers away and that they managed to ask for their help. James is initially against it, but with no options, he says they should hurry. He says goodbye to Abby, and the two leave together on the skidoo while the rest of the group waits. They travel for a few hours and arrive at the workers' site but find no one. They call for the team but receive no response. They decide to check the vehicles but discover they are out of gas and the radios do not work. Ed wants to go to another station, but James says Fort Crow is 14 kilometers away from them. Ed tries to start the vehicle, but without success, and James realizes that the oil has leaked and warns Ed. James says not to pressure themselves, as they still have a day to reach Fort Crow on foot. Ed thinks it is crazy to walk all that in the snow, but agrees. The two soon start walking, and at the base, Lee is acting strangely and is also hearing the same noise that Maxwell heard. As the women cover the bodies of the dead, Maria misses Lee and goes out to look for him, but only finds his boots in the snow. Back with the men, they continue to walk, and Ed finds two dead bodies and starts to cry. James tries to talk to him, but the man does not want to chat and runs off. James goes after him, but Ed ends up falling into a frozen ice puddle. He manages to get back to the surface and grabs onto the ice, while James tries to rescue him with his belt. His boot is stuck between two rocks. The man, to save himself, decides to abandon it, and James drags him to a safe place. He realizes that the man is freezing and quickly grabs some branches to try to start a fire. During the night, the two talk, and Ed reveals that Abby is very important to him, as they had an affair in the past, but James does not seem bothered by that talk. At the base, Abby searches for Lee, but finds no success and returns inside when she finds Maria trying to kill Robert. Maria starts laughing madly, and soon the two begin to engage in a physical fight, and Abby accidentally throws her against a table and ends up killing her. She becomes desperate over that situation and decides to hide in a room, but has no time to think, as the lights begin to flicker, and she starts hearing knocks on the door. Back with the men, they begin to feel that abnormal wind outside, and Ed wants to continue to seek help. But James says they cannot leave there, as he does not know what they are dealing with. He sees those same things and asks if Ed can see, but the man thinks James is crazy. A colossal monster approaches, but Ed cannot see and knocks James out, thinking he is insane. Abby checks the situation and tries to communicate with James, who responds informing that Ed went off alone and abandoned him. He asks her to hang in there and to inform the world what happened there. Abby cries, and James reveals that he can already see the town, but finds Ed's body on the ground and warns Abby. She asks if he is alive, but the call starts to fail. James is struck by the creature and falls next to Ed, but manages to move and go to the flare gun. Ed wakes up asking him to shoot. James sees the monster approaching Ed and, in shock, shoots, irritating the creature that takes him away and kills him. The next day, Abby wakes up in a hospital and searches for doctors and patients, but finds no one until she finds a doctor who had taken his own life. Desperate, she exits and finds everything abandoned.